We start in Ukraine, where leaders have declared martial law to protect the country against Russian aggression. That's after Russia detained 3 Ukrainian Navy ships off the coast of Crimea on Sunday. Now, Moscow says the vessels illegally entered its territorial waters in the Kerch Strait, ignoring orders from the border service. The tension along the Kerch Strait comes after 4 years of crossings without these types of conflicts. RT's Yulia Shapovalova has the story.
On Sunday morning, November 25th, 3 ships of the Ukrainian Navy crossed the state border of Russia in violation of Article 19 and 21 of the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea. The ships were on their way from the Black Sea port of Odessa to Mariupol on the Azov Sea, moving in the direction of the Crimean bridge across the Kerch Strait. The vessels entered the temporarily closed Russian waters and were said to have made dangerous maneuvers for several hours there, not responding to requests from the Coast Guard.
3 Ukrainian Navy vessels crossed the Russian border and illegally entered temporarily closed Russian territorial waters. They have not provided the mandatory advance notice. They are not on the shipping route schedule. They're not complying with orders and are carrying out dangerous maneuvers.
The Russian border guards tried not to use force, but in the end it was the only way to stop the trespassers. The Ukrainian sailors stopped after they were rammed by the Russian warship, the Don. All 3 of the Ukrainian ships were detained approximately 20 kilometers off the Russian coast. During the incident, 3 Ukrainian sailors suffered minor injuries. They were provided with medical care and there's no threat to their lives. Russia has opened a criminal case on the violation of the state border and requested an urgent meeting of the UN Security Council on the situation in the Azov Sea. Ahead of the meeting, the Russian foreign minister gave his reaction.
Talking about the actions we're going to take at the UN Security Council, you know, we don't have any illusions, taking into account that the West has adopted a position of unconditional support for Poroshenko and his regime. But yesterday's calls from the EU to both Russia and Ukraine to exercise restraint made us think. If they ask Ukraine to do this, it means that Kiev has certainly done something that their Western sponsors do not approve of. I hope that the Ukrainian authorities will draw certain conclusions from that.
Russia as well as Ukraine have each called the incident a provocation. In the Kerch Strait, all ship movements are meant to be permitted, and the ships of the Ukrainian Navy were meant to strictly adhere to international maritime law by requesting permission to pass, something Ukraine's done many times in the past. In September, its ships passed through the Kerch Strait without problems, but according to the Russian side, this time Kiev deliberately set out for a provocation in the Azov Sea. The goal of Kiev, according to Russia, is to strengthen anti-Russian sentiment in the West, tighten sanctions further against Moscow, as well as to impose martial law in the country. Such a move would mean elections would not need to be held in Ukraine. Analysts say that would play into President Poroshenko's hands, as his current ratings are very poor. In addition, a meeting of Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump is due this week at the G20 summit in Argentina, and some believe this incident could be an attempt to disrupt it. Well, the Ukrainian president has now signed a decree imposing martial law, while the army has been put on full alert. Russia has considered Crimea its territory since the referendum in 2014, along with the territorial waters of the Kerch Strait. Yulia Shapovalova, RT.
For more on the UN Security Council meeting and the reaction around the world, we turn to former U.S. diplomat Jim Jatras. Jim, thank you for joining on this. Obviously, this is an issue that's come up over the weekend, but obviously Nikki Haley appeared today in front of the UN, discussed it a little bit more. What do you make about the latest tensions between Ukraine and Russia?
Well, as we might expect, you're getting the charges and countercharges as to which side is staging the provocation against whom. I did think, in line with what Foreign Minister Lavrov said, it is somewhat interesting that the EU statement was more balanced than we're used to hearing out of the West. Usually when anything happens, never mind any proof, any investigation, just accuse the Russians of being at fault and be done with it, slap some more sanctions on. I assume we'll get to that eventually anyhow, but it is interesting that there is at least some voice of restraint to say, both of you step down, let's take a look and see what happened, which I think is the right approach.
So then why does the United States, like Nikki Haley, go out today and just start talking about it? Why is the United States even getting involved in this? Why can't the two of them just handle their own sandbox?
Well, you know, that's a $64 question, isn't it? Why do we care so much about Ukraine? You have all this fluff saying, oh, we have to worry about international law, this and that. Well, like the fact we have illegally troops in Syria, the fact we illegally bombed Serbia. We have no dog in the fight in Ukraine, but unfortunately, a lot of people who have their own agenda regarding Russia, and I think Nikki Haley, unfortunately, who thankfully will be gone in a month, is near the top of that list. I'd like to think things will get better, but there's no real evidence of that yet. Maybe if Mr. Trump and Mr. Putin meet later this next week at the G20, they can start to work things out.
Well, it's interesting. For a while, Ukraine has been trying to get into NATO and has been pushing for it. They would like to be a part of it. They have not been officially adapted in, yet we keep saying the U.S. and their allies are the ones that are going to push back on this. Why all of a sudden does why are even the rest of the allies? You said EU is balanced, but why are there so much quick to defense the rise for Ukraine when they're not even a part of the NATO alliance officially?
Sure, and the Brits, by the way,
and why aren't they?
Are pushing particularly hard on this, even wanting to send warships into the Sea of Azov, which talk about a provocation. I mean, the short answer is anybody with any sense knows that trying to actually admit Ukraine into NATO would result in war. There's simply no way that can be avoided. How would we react if somebody pulled Mexico into a hostile alliance to the United States? But it seems that there is just some agenda that people have in some Western countries to demonize Russia, to throw everything but the kitchen sink at them for no real objective that makes any sense in terms of national interests.
Well, another thing that does usually make sense is timing. And that's right now what we have to look at as part of the story. This has been going on for 4 years, never been brought up. Ukraine, there's never been an issue in this particular area. Now, however, with President Poroshenko being not necessarily the front runner for his re-election campaign, the elections are in March. Now he's declaring martial law, which I don't think, I'm hoping Nikki Haley, when she made her assumptions today, that she realized that means that he has full control of the media and that he can push these elections off. We would be out of our mind right now if that was happening with any other country. So why are we endorsing this type of activity? And should we be looking at the election schedule possibly that might be a motivation for why Poroshenko is doing this sort of aggressive mood?
You know, there are a lot of rumors that are circulating around. There's even some things you find, it was on the internet, so it must be true, that the United States has indicated that we're not interested in supporting Poroshenko anymore. Maybe we want Yulia Tymoshenko or somebody else to become president. This is all speculation. The state of emergency that as I understand, was agreed to by the Rada after some fairly fractious debate will not extend up to the election. The claim is that the election will go forward as scheduled in March. We'll see if that actually happens. Mr. Poroshenko has been playing a lot of games recently, most notably with regard to the Orthodox Church in Ukraine, which has a huge potential for violence. So you have to wonder how far will the United States and our NATO allies go down the road, as you say, to a country that's not even allied to us, to really vindicate the political agenda of one guy.
Well, and I'm sorry, I have to think back to this whole thought of Russian meddling in the U.S. election. And could this be said about the opposite of where the U.S. could be potentially being drawn in, whether known or unknown, as a toy and a pawn by Poroshenko and Ukrainians to play in their election?
Oh, no, that's different, because when we do it, it's for democracy, like when we stole the 1996 election in Russia, which nobody hides. I mean, it was frankly admitted at the time, that was okay because it was for democracy.
Okay, well, you are definitely someone who is for democracy, and thanks for joining us on this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey YouTube, thanks for checking out our channel. We hope you enjoyed the video. We have tons of content for you just like this. For more of RT America's one-of-a-kind news and analysis, be sure to subscribe and never stop questioning more.